Hello, everyone. LC Holt here, and this is my update for the week of May the 18th. Joining me today, very special show we have. It's my usual co-host, Rebecca Ivey, and Chaney Morrow. Chaney.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
You probably know him from films like Haunt, from the upcoming Wrong Turn remake. Is it safe to call it a remake?
uh, yeah. I mean, reboot, remake, pretty much the same thing.
Yeah,
To me, anyway.
I'm always a little bit confused about like the reboot remake fiasco. I mean, to me, I guess I'm of the age it's just always a remake, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, speaking of remakes, today we're going to be talking about one of the great remakes. Last week we talked about a great remake, Scarface, which I think most of us can agree is a great remake. This week we're going to discuss another one, and that is John Carpenter's The Thing. I mean, this is one we've been talking about for a long time, wanting to talk about for a long time. So let's jump into it. A lot to discuss here. The Thing is based on John W. Campbell Jr.'s 1938 novella, Who Goes There?, which I read a while back. And it's not my favorite story. It's not that the story itself is bad. It's just that there are many, many characters in the novella. There are a lot more characters in the novella than are in either of the films. Have you guys read the novella by any chance?
I have not.
There are 37 characters in the novella.
Whoa. Hell of a body count.
It is a hell of a body count, yeah. Luckily, they changed that for the film adaptations. The first of which was many years after the novella was published in 1951. Howard Hawks produced, well, he produced and quite possibly may have directed. There's controversy.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Poltergeist all over again.
It's exactly what I was going to say. There's a lot of Poltergeist controversy over whether, Howard Hawks or Chris Ivey directed it. But officially, Christian Ivey directed it and Howard Hawks produced it. And it was called The Thing from Another World. So already they had changed the Who Goes There. Maybe they were afraid of that whole thing about, punctuation in titles being bad luck. But for whatever reason, The Thing from Another World, 1951, set in the North Pole rather than Antarctica, which is where Who Goes There was set. And as I said, they cut out a lot of characters. They gave some female leads, which is unusual. And they changed the nature of the Thing, which even back in the John W. Campbell Jr. novella, the Thing was a shape-shifting entity, The odds, what happened with the film The Thing from Another World is you got a giant
Carrot.
He was a carrot. Yeah. Exactly. And they call him a super carrot at one point, right?
Yeah.
He's vegetation who drinks blood. There's something very 1950s about that interpretation. Okay, I've never been the hugest fan of the original. I have to confess. If you guys want to knock me down and throw me out, then that's fine. But I'm not a huge fan. Chaney, huge fan?
No, I wouldn't say a fan. More as it's interesting, but in terms of like enjoying it, no, I wouldn't call myself a fan.
What about you, Beck? There are a lot of sci-fi horror films from that period that I do not enjoy. And The Thing from Another World, though, as that goes, is kind of high on the list of quality films of that time period. I mean, as 1950s sci-fi goes, it's pretty damn good. And there's a lot of innovations made in that film, without a doubt. Great imagery, stuff that even survived into the version that we're going to be talking about today. And it was so influential that people didn't forget it, which which is something that's interesting to say about those kind, because there was a slew of those sorts of films in that time, in that era. And The Thing from Another World endured, and people were talking about remaking it all the way up into the 70s, which is when it really got serious. David Foster and Lawrence Turman got serious about actually remaking the film. After eventually they got the rights from a producer named Wilbert Stark, and they set this thing up at Universal. Now, the first director, okay, more controversy on the horizon. Hang on. I don't think, Chaney, I don't think you know this about me, but I know Rebecca knows this about me. The first director was a fellow named Tobe Hooper. Now, the reason Rebecca's laughing is she knows I'm not a huge Tobe Hooper fan. And this
Except for Life Force.
Oh, now let's not get crazy.
That's your favorite film ever, Life Force. John Larroquette being the narrator at the beginning, which is totally weird because I remember when I heard that I was like, "That's the dude from Night Court."
Yeah. See, he got him. He got him from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He's like, that was such a great hit. We're gonna get Larroquette in this, and this is gonna be a hit too. Little did he know.
I just thought Night Court when I was a kid because that was the show that was my parents watched. So.
Yes, yeah. Whenever Larroquette and Night Court, Oh, speaking of Texas Chainsaw, which I do like. Now that's something I'll definitely give. That Tobe Hooper made a great first film. Chaney, okay, what do you think of Tobe Hooper?
I appreciate the first Chainsaw Massacre. It kind of spearheaded a whole like subgenre to itself. It affected a lot of what came after it. Eaten Alive, I'm a fan of Neville Brand, so I watch it for that because he's incredible in it. I mean, the movie's pretty silly, but he's incredible. I wouldn't put him up there. Like when I think of John Carpenter or Wes Craven, even I don't think about Tobe Hooper.
Yes,
and all praises to Chainsaw Massacre. But did he really direct Poltergeist? I don't think it's possible. It's too damn good.
I was about to say they could have just done a repeat of the controversy with the original thing, have Tobe Hooper and then have someone else direct it.
Yeah.
And he gets the credit.
Just stick his name on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We did a whole show, Chaney. I don't know if you saw that one. We did a whole show about the Poltergeist deal.
No, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, that was my personal opinion is I'm right there with you. This is exactly what I said about the quality. You cannot make movies like Poltergeist and then turn around and make Life Force. It's impossible.
Yeah. Right.
And then the consistency of the career in terms of wacky quality after that for Tobe Hooper. It's not like he just made Poltergeist and then a bad movie. He made Poltergeist and then kind of bad, okay, bad for a while, But anyway, I'm getting off the Tobe Hooper thing and I'm getting back onto the thing. I think I've beat up the poor man, rest his soul, for long enough.
You beat his corpse like Mussolini.
I did. Yeah. And I apologize to all of his living relatives. Kim Hinkle, who was the co-screenwriter of Texas Chainsaw, wrote the script for Tobe Hooper's The Thing, which was an underwater romp. It sounds so much like Tobe Hooper. They envisioned it as Moby Dick with an alien. Okay. I mean,
cool. That's interesting.
Yeah. We'll just leave that one laying on the floor along with Toby. But John Landis was also an early person involved with this project. It would have been interesting to see what John Landis would have come up with. But all of these earlier incarnations fell through. And this was kind of going all the way through the 70s, mid-70s on, until the movie Halloween came out. And there you got John Carpenter giving a wholehearted shout out to The Thing from Another World by actually having it featured prominently in the film. It's one of the films that the children watch as they're being babysitted, and in Halloween 1978, which gives you an idea of what a Howard Hawks fan John Carpenter truly was. He loved The Thing from Another World. He loved a lot of that sort of 1950s style science fiction and horror films. And before long, after a string of successes, starting with Halloween, John Carpenter came into the fold as a possible director. He was suddenly a bankable name now. And so when he came on board, he had sort of his own ideas, which he presented to Universal and the producers. He wanted to more closely adapt Who Goes There, turning kind of shying away from the giant super carrot and moving more toward the sort of Agatha Christie style. That was there's an Agatha Christie novel which is very good called "And Then There Were None."
Oh yeah,
and
I did that play when I was in high school.
Did you really?
It was called 10 Little Indians, but
right, which was the original title of the book, 10 Little Indians, and then they turned it into and Then There Were None. So as you know, that's a great story about 10 characters all trapped in one location, and they're getting axed one at a time. And you don't know who the it is, yes. And the eventual twist in that is quite, it's Agatha Christie. It's fun. She hardly ever delivered a bad twist, and that one is included. So that was sort of the framework by which John Carpenter decided to model his version of The Thing. They dropped, to be a little more timely, they dropped From Another World, and just decided to call it, because that part alone sounds like a soap opera, From Another World. Drop that shit, go straight to The Thing.
Yeah, good move.
Yeah. But the thing about Carpenter, even though he had an idea how he wanted to approach it story-wise, he did not want to write the screenplay, because he had just written a version of the film, The Philadelphia Experiment, and had gone through a long development process with that didn't pan out. And I think he was just written out. He didn't want to do another screenplay. So the person they went through a couple of different people. Richard Matheson was one person that he thought of, but Matheson, for whatever reason, passed on it. He might have been a little busy, Dick Matheson was never one that didn't have plates spinning, I guess you could say. He always had something going on. Nigel Neal from the Quatermass Experiment, the great writer of that series of BBC dramas, which have influenced many horror writers, including John Carpenter. He's another person that Carpenter mentioned. But again, Nigel Neal said he wasn't interested. And so when you think about sci-fi horror, the one thing you definitely think about is the Bad News Bears. The screenwriter they eventually went with was the screenwriter of the Bad News Bears. But hey, that's a good movie.
That's a damn fine
Is that
film.
Goldman?
No, Bill Lancaster's. Bill Lancaster.
How did I think William Goldman? I don't know why I was thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, hey, William Goldman, I would love to have seen his version of The Thing. That would have been badass.
Mm-hmm. It would have been pretty gnarly.
It would have, yeah. Like, I could definitely see that after all the King adaptations. He would have turned in an amazing The Thing. But Bill Lancaster is who they went with. If that sounds familiar, he is the son of Burt, the actor Burt Lancaster's son. He had worked on several films and was at that time famous and really hot for just written, as I said, the Bad News Bears. And so one of the things that Bill Lancaster brought to the film was he decided, okay, I like the "and then there were none" idea. And the thing about that is it's a really compact group of characters. We have 37 characters in this novella. So Bill Lancaster was like, we ain't going with the 37, bro. We're going to take it down to how about 12?
We'll be here forever killing off 37 people.
That's right. And that's kind of my biggest problem. I know I said before that Who Goes There when I read it. It's not that I dislike it. It's just that with 37 characters and so short a story, I could never tell who was talking. I mean, they had no personalities. They were
I was
just
going to say it was probably also hard to become attached to someone, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Someone you're rooting for.
I'm not entirely sure why John Campbell Jr. decided to go with that many, because that's exactly what the problem was. I didn't know I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And it's a very dialogue heavy novella. Much more that than anything else. So when you have, this guy talking, this guy talking, this guy talking, and you're like, okay, I don't remember who started this conversation, But anyway, that I think was Bill Lancaster's brilliant idea. Another one he wanted to have more of another Bill Lancaster idea was that he wanted the lead character, who in the Howard Hawks one was a meteorologist, who you knew was the good guy from the beginning. He wanted to do this sort of thing where you had the ensemble, and at first you didn't know who the lead was going to be. And eventually the lead sort of started to emerge out of the group, and it would be someone that you didn't really think would naturally be a leading man. He would be more of a loner, and then eventually he would come into the forefront as being the smartest, or at least maybe the most capable of the group. And in this case, he changed the lead from the meteorologist to the loner helicopter pilot, McCready. And he also decided to open the story in the middle of the action, which, if you remember the original Howard Hawks one, there's a lot of flashbacks going on to how they found the thing and, everything. So being more contemporary, Bill Lancaster said, let's just go ahead and start right in the thick of things, which is what ultimately, they did. One thing Carpenter insisted on, though, was in the Lancaster script, the thing is not seen that much. And John Carpenter, once he hired Rob Bottin, it is Bottin, right?
I've heard Bottin.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Bottin, because I've heard both, and I think Bottin is the best option. Rob Bottin was hired. You know how old he was when he did?
He was like 20, 21, 22, something like that.
He was, yeah, 21.
That's right.
Unbelievable that this kid not only was given the job to do this at Universal, such a huge monster movie, and doing it all himself, but that he managed to create at 21 one of the most stunning examples of monster effects, I think, ever. I think it's safe to say ever. It's quite an achievement. Another thing Carpenter, and we'll go more into Bottin here shortly, but another thing Carpenter changed from the Lancaster script was the ending, in which it's very clear in Bill Lancaster's script that both McCready and Childs are aliens at the end. And that basically the fire dies out, rescuers discover them in the spring, and they're still alive. And that's how you know, okay, obviously they didn't survive the winter and they're aliens. The helicopter lands and they get on board, and I think there's some sort of cheesy line about, can you take us to a warm place or something like that? And so they get on the helicopter, and so you know that the thing in the form of McCready and Childs is going back to civilization. And that was Lancaster's original idea for an ending. It was the original scripted ending. But Carpenter said, let's go a little more ambiguous. Chaney, you look like you're about to say something. What do you?
No, that was, I'd never heard that before. But that's interesting as hell. I had no idea there was the original ending was yeah, because that doesn't feel like Carpenter's style,
Yeah.
But I never knew that. That's interesting as hell.
Yeah, that was Lancaster's original idea. Now, this film, as I said, was a Universal film. They originally budgeted it at $10 million, with $200,000 going toward the effects. But when they saw Rob Bottin's, I keep saying Bottin, what's wrong with me? Rob Bottin's designs, they increased the budget to $750,000 just for the effects, which I think was a smart idea. But those designs were crazy in a good way. But they did throw in some cost-cutting type measures. One of the things was, they had the two campments. They had the American camp and they had the Norwegian camp. One way they managed to cut the cost was to say, okay, you're going to blow up the American camp at the end of the movie, right? And they're like, yeah. Well, why don't you just use the destroyed American camp for the Norwegian camp and just shoot those scenes after you blow it up? And they were like, oh, yeah, that's probably a good idea. And so that's what they did. So they actually only built one encampment, and they used it for both. It's just after they blew it up, then it became the Norwegian camp. So not a bad idea. Final budget ended up at $15 million, which is pretty hefty, for 1982-3. It's amazing to think that Kurt Russell was not the immediate choice for MacReady. Even though, they were already friends, Kurt Russell and John Carpenter, and they even bounced around ideas back when Carpenter was in the script stages. And they even bounced around casting ideas. So it's kind of odd to think that Kurt Russell was the last person officially cast in the movie. But that's kind of how it turned out. I think it was almost one of those things where they were like, where Carpenter was like, yeah, I don't know who's going to play this. Like, I always just thought it was a Kurt Russell type character. And then Kurt Russell was like, well, why don't you cast me? And that's sort of the kind of thing it sounds like. And, John Carpenter was like, oh, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. But you had so Russell, having been established at this point after Escape from New York and the seminal Elvis miniseries.
Elvis, yes.
He wound up getting $400,000 to play MacReady in the movie, which meant that he was the highest paid because all the other actors got $50,000 apiece. And Kurt Russell,
whoa,
that's a pretty substantial change. Yeah, he got $350,000 more than everybody else. But it's interesting that you say Wilford Brimley, because whenever I think of Wilford Brimley, I think of Our House. I mean, that's growing up.
I was going to say, once he became an alien, he hatched out of the cocoon and went to Our House with Deidre Hall, who was Satan.
Deidre was Satan. That's right. Deidre, on hiatus from Days of Our Lives, became on Our House with
and then eventually he gets diabetes.
That's right. And he is not the Wilford Brimley at this point. He is a Wilford Brimley, because if you remember the credits, that's how he is. He's dot Wilford Brimley. Yeah. He was a total unknown at that time. Did you know that Carl Weathers was considered for Childs?
I did not know that.
That's an interesting choice, I think. Isaac Hayes was another one. Because, of course, he had worked. Carpenter had worked with Isaac Hayes in Escape from New York. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those two were ahead of Keith David. And I'm glad Keith David got the role. Part of me thinks that maybe Carl Weathers would have been a little too big for the part. I mean, because he's a pretty big guy, like stout. Yeah. So I think that even though Keith David is a big dude, I think that maybe that was a good balance. He wasn't quite like bodybuilder big, but he was still big enough to be intimidating if it need be. Ernie Hudson was another front runner for that. So Ernie Hudson got gypped on the Thing, and then he got all his lines taken away from him in Ghostbusters. The poor guy. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, but he still made a good life for himself. I mean, you can't cry
the
for
Crow?
me. Oh yeah, The Crow. There you go. I remember seeing that in theaters. Wilford Brimley, as I said, was an unknown at the time, which is odd to think about now. Because my whole lifetime I knew Wilford Brimley. Like everybody just knew him, But at this time,
he had diabetes.
Everyone,
the diabetes man.
He is the diabetes
oatmeal man.
Yep. And every time I just can't get Our House out. And I've mentioned that to I've mentioned that to other people, and they're like, "What are you talking
I
about?"
remember that show. It was
It's like,
yeah.
how could you not remember Our House with the immortal Deidre Hall
I just remember going, the Cocoon Grandpa has his own show.
and the little boy that was in Dr. Quinn later on.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, but he was meant to be like one of the first infected, Wilford Brimley. But they wanted to keep that a secret, and so their idea was to hire an actor who would be like an everyman. Even after he flipped out, you would just go, well, maybe he's just under stress because he looks like a kindly man. So that was sort of their idea in casting Wilford Brimley, to make him the one person you would think just by looking at him would be kind of harmless. And then you find out, well, yeah, he is definitely infected. So it was kind of a neat idea. Another person considered for that role, I think you both will like this, is Donald Pleasance, of course.
Oh.
But I think the overall idea was that he was a little too intimidating from, Jump Street.
Yeah.
He didn't have necessarily that kindly thing. Maybe people would just look at him and go, Blofeld.
Yeah.
But and no matter what anybody says, he's still one of my favorite Blofelds. I mean, yeah, it's true. He's soft spoken. He doesn't move around a lot, but yeah, he's awesome. Now I want to throw out to you guys, and I want to get your reaction to both of these, because while we're talking about casting, the role of Palmer. Palmer is, he's always smoking his weed and he's always quite happy. He's the most mellow, I think, of the men at the encampment. Let me tell you two of the people who were considered and tested for this role. One of them is Jay Leno.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
No shit. Okay, that's random as hell. I know. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of chin and head bobbing on that. That's not what. Another one.
The thing's coming for us.
And all I can imagine.
That was a bad Jay Leno impersonation.
Whenever
it was like a bad impersonation of Conan O'Brien's impersonation.
Yeah, good call. Yeah. The only thing I can think about with Jay Leno though is in the moment when his head splits open when he's discovered to be one of the a thing. You could just imagine the chin. Exactly, the chin splits open, and he attacks.
That could split off into its own spider monster, just
right.
The chin.
Yeah, and little stalks come up out of the cleft, But another person that was tested was Gary Shandling. Yeah, Gary Shandling as Palmer. I don't know.
They got the same kind of hair, with the same kind of curly hair.
That's true.
That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, I think at that point wasn't Shandling was just kind of a known writer and comedian.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's just did he ever do a horror film of any kind?
I don't think so. No,
I don't think so. No, that's just damn it. Leno and Shandling.
Yeah. No,
that blows me.
Yeah, those are some odd choices. And when I fell across that, I was like, I'm really glad they cast David Clennon because, I can definitely see him more as kind of the pothead, sort of the slightly spacey dude. I just don't like those two earlier choices. And it's not that I don't like the people, but
I mean, if you watched it today with Jay Leno in it, I think all you would see was Jay Leno. You wouldn't be able to focus on. You're like, oh God, it's Jay Leno. Is he going to do a really bad monologue and pull out news clippings?
The world's biggest Jay Leno fan, ladies and gentlemen.
Conan, if you want me on your podcast, give me a call.
Anyways. She's Team Coco all the way.
You're right.
Richard Mazur auditioned for Gary, but he asked to play Clark instead because he thought, that's a more interesting character. It's not quite as front and center, doesn't have as many showy lines or anything, but he doesn't have his special pop gun. But he is an interesting character with the dogs and everything like that. And he thought he more closely related to that character. So it's kind of odd that you would have an actor who would say, I don't want all these lines. I want the dog guy. but he liked that character. I kind of like that character. I might have been in that position, but good choice. I think good choice.
Oh,
Especially since the guy who wound up playing, Gary was famous. I mean, whenever I think of Donald Moffat, all I can think of are those damn eyebrows, man.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And the man is
Legendary eyebrows.
There's
Legendary.
only two people I know famous for their eyebrows, and he's one of them, Donald Moffat. And the amazing thing about his eyebrows is his eyebrows were always gray, and his hair never was. It was like this, the rug and the drapes never quite matched on Donald's face.
He couldn't quite get the eyebrow dye to work.
Yeah, and that just became his trademark. Carpenter's wife at the time, Adrienne Barbeau, was the only female in the cast, and of course, you guys all know what she was. She was the voice of the computer.
Voice, yeah.
She was the voice of the chess computer, which Kurt Russell gave the immortal line "Lying bitch,"
cheating bitch,
cheating bitch, cheating bitch. Yeah, that's right. You're right.
Then destroys the computer. Like, damn.
Yeah.
Now you're down a computer, Mac. Shit.
No more chest for him. No more chest for you. Filming began on this thing up in Alaska in August of 1981. And that's where they built the outposts at. They actually built the outposts in the summer, and then they let it snow. And they naturally aged it, because by the time they came out there in the winter, or, August, I guess the late, kind of the fall area, it was ready to go. It was all snowed in. And it looked like it had been there a while. So it wasn't a bad idea, to go ahead and build it. It was kind of tricky to get there. Long road, icy road, 500-foot embankment on one side. You definitely didn't want to slide off of there. And there were a couple of incidents where there was some sliding crew trucks and stuff like that. And one in particular, I think, had the actors on it at one point. And it did a little slide. But nobody died, luckily. Thing about the outpost, though, they filmed inside and out of it. It was unheated. A lot of the stuff where you see them, sitting around in their underwear and things, that was done back at the Universal soundstage. But the actual thing that they built in Alaska had no heat to it, which I guess kind of helped in the fact that, I think you guys have probably heard that it was so cold, the camera lenses froze, and you could not take them inside into the heat, because if you did, they would fog up, and it would take hours for the fog to go away. So they had to leave the cameras in the cold whenever they were filming exteriors or anything that had to be in the actual temperature of Alaska in the fall of 1981. Keith David, here's another thing that happened. He broke his hand a day before you were going to start shooting, which must have been a bit of a heart stopper. I think as actors, Chaney, you and I could imagine the heart stopping sort of nature of that. And he tried to hide it. He was a good actor. He tried to hide it, the fact that his hand was broken. But I think Carpenter just saw it at one point and was like, "Why is your hand swollen twice the size?" And Keith David was like, "Well, I fell." And it was so bad he had to have pins put in it.
Oh, shit.
And if you watch the film, for about half the film, they don't show Keith David's right hand. They hide it in a number of different ways. He's either got it kind of at his side, or it's just, close-ups. You don't have to worry about it. Or it's in his pocket or something. So they shot while his hand was broken and still healing. So I suppose about halfway through, it was to the point where you could kind of show it. But half the movie, they had to figure out how not to, include Keith David's hand. Filmed up there for 12 weeks. Now, I wanted to go back to Rob Bottin, because as we said before, 21 years old, and he created this amazing creature that his idea was it would it would show some of its travels in the forms that it took. He had this idea that this thing had traveled through the galaxy, met and assimilated many different races of aliens, and that by the time it got to Earth and was attacking these fellas at this outpost, that when it changed, when it morphed and things, you would see little hints of the other aliens it had assimilated throughout the galaxy. What do you guys think? What some of your favorite Rob Bottin contributions? Do you have one in particular that you really love? Because there's quite a few to choose from of his amazing work.
Oh, there are many to pick, but I think my personal favorite is probably the autopsy. You know, the two-headed beast that they bring back. Probably that whole process, because the way it's steaming.
Yes.
And when he cuts it open, and I had read that it grossed everyone out there except for Wilford Brimley, because he was like a hunter. So he had, you know, gutted deers, all that. So he said it was, yeah, you know, here's a heart, here's some lung. Hey, you know, this is normal. And everyone else is like, oh, yeah, my God. But I felt like I could smell that damn thing.
That's exactly
when I watch it.
Exactly what I was going to say. That room, your room seems to stink up whenever they cut that thing open. Yeah,
it looks like the most fucked up, like, barbecued chicken ever. Oh, it's just I haven't eaten barbecued chicken in years. I think since I was a kid, just because I think that grossed me out. It scarred me. It just looks like barbecued chicken, man. It's so gross with the skin pulling back. I was, awesome. But that's my favorite.
Yes. Good. That's a good call. And then, you know, just the way that they cover it in the jelly, you know, and it's dripping and it just looks so organic and just nasty.
My favorite scene in the movie, I mean, it's probably an obvious choice, but I like when he's got them all tied up and he keeps hitting that thing, you know, singing. And then they're like, and then the one person turns into and the other guys are tied up like, oh my God. Oh my God.
That's the moment. I think that's one of the best time scares in the film, because when he hits the blood with the hot wire, it's at a moment when you do not think at all that something's going to happen. You know, it really it shows that sort of early Carpenter craftsmanship, because I really think he was a great craftsman. I've talked on this show before about one of my favorite horror film craftsmen, just technically. A guy that can make a really flawless film that just flows is David Cronenberg, who, you know, you watch his movies and it's like looking at a well-designed house, you know, a great architect. And I think in his prime, Carpenter had that his version of that sort of a thing. And a lot of the thing, if you look at it, yeah, I can say there's great craftsmanship, and I'm glad you brought that up, Rebecca, because that's one of those all-time scenes that everyone sort of talks about, you know, the blood test, which is in the novella. That was something that they brought over from the novella. Just in the novella, you have no idea who's being tested because you can't tell apart. In the movie, you certainly can figure it out. I want to say, too, about Rob Bottin, he nearly killed himself on this movie. By the end of it, the kid had double pneumonia. He had a bleeding ulcer. He took a lot on himself making this, and basically just collapsed when it was over with. But what an achievement.
Absolutely.
You know, and I'm glad he pulled through, because had he not, it would have been the penultimate achievement of a 20-year-old.
Well, it's also, you know, you watch it today, everything still holds up, and then you see the one that was released, you know, that one, and it just doesn't match up. It doesn't, the effects, it just looks, I don't know, not a fan.
I can't believe when they added that prequel, when they made that they opted for CGI. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Why not? I mean, if any horror flick should be practically, like, have nothing but practical effects, it's the thing. It's the prequel to the thing. Like, and they overdid the CGI.
Well,
I always wanted to see it because I was always fascinated, like always curious about the Norwegians and their like how they came to. And there were things about the prequel I did enjoy. I didn't. I'm not a hater of it or anything. You know,
I like
it's
the
not.
mystery of it because that's what keeps, what is it like the old Hitchcock thing, leave it to the imagination because
Yep.
people think up things far worse than you'll ever think up. So
Yeah.
I felt like it killed some of the mystery. And then it just, I don't know, it didn't have the synergy of the thing.
I know it had twice as many people, but half the amount of energy between them.
Yeah.
And there weren't. What was weird about the prequel was that there wasn't enough Norwegians in the Norwegian camp. I don't know why. I always thought that it was just Norwegians. Like
Yeah,
that's
a good point. Yeah.
And you watch the movie and it's like, well, there are an awful lot
of Brits, a couple Americans, only a small handful of Norwegians. Joel Egerton wasn't Norwegian. He was playing American in the movie. Yeah, where the hell are all the Norwegians?
Right.
Sure.
It's very odd. I don't know. That was my impression. I guess it was like Rebecca was saying about mystery. The movie I made in my mind was like subtitled,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in all fairness, I obviously they didn't want to release a subtitled prequel, but I guess the question could be, or the question could
John
be
Carpenter would have.
Why would you? Why would you even want to do a prequel? I think would be the thing. Yeah. One question that could be posed. And I could say, well, money, obviously. But the Thing franchise has never been known for its earning ability. So.
Yeah. Well, it was a huge flop at the time, wasn't it?
Yes.
Like completely under no one gave a shit till years later.
That's right. It's one of those movies that just grew. It's sort of like last week we were talking about Scarface. It's sort of like Scarface. It grew over time. But I was going to talk earlier about, my favorite effect. Here's my opinion on the effect thing. I love what they call the chest chomper, which is the scene where,
Norris. Yep.
About to go in with the defibrillator, and when he goes in, the chest opens up, the jagged teeth, and boom, gets his arms. Copper leans back after his arms have been chewed off, and they had an amputee wearing a copper mask is how they filmed. Nowadays, of course, you would just put the blue socks on his arms, and take it out. But they actually had to think about, well, how are we going to do this? Well, we'll get an amputee and we'll put the actor's face on him with, a mask, which is great. The actors, but that's so flawless. Like you look at that and it goes by and you go, yeah, that's the actor with no arms. It's a great effect. I think Rebecca and I have always talked about this on the show. There was something about when you had to think it through. Sometimes you got the best results, because maybe you couldn't do it. And maybe you had to be more creative about how you did, and The Thing, I think, was made in that time period. Obviously, digital was not an option. You just, CGI didn't exist for many years to come. And so you got great scenes like the ones we've been mentioning using the practical effects, the chest chomper and the two-faced autopsy. And of course, really the greatest effect in the blood testing scene is the acting, because that's a fantastic group of actors sitting around, some of which are tied to a sofa and they're just talking, and it's so tense. It's such a wonderfully written and acted scene. Okay, we're going to talk for a minute about the ending. Because there are many different endings to The Thing. As I said, the scripted ending, which we talked about earlier, was never filmed, so that wasn't an option. But originally there was like a happy ending shot in which MacReady got picked up. MacReady in this ending was the only survivor, and he got picked up and rescued and taken to a hospital unit elsewhere, and they did the test on him, and they discovered that he wasn't infected. So it was a very much the Thing died in the fire. Everybody's and now if any of it exists, it's going to be snowed under, and now the survivor is okay. So very like nice ending. Carpenter said it was cheesy. Like, I don't want the film to end that way. Cheesy shit. And then he turned around and he said, well, here's my idea for the ending. He always wanted to go dark with it, obviously. Talked about the script ending he didn't like. One version of the ending, which is not unlike what we have now, is MacReady survives by himself. First of all, let me ask this before I go through all these. What do you guys think of the happy ending I just described? Yay or nay? Chaney?
No, I don't like it.
You think cheesy?
Yeah, I think it kind of would shoot the tone down. Like if it ended that way, it would kind of negate the tone that's been set the whole movie. The ending that we see, I think, is about as perfect as it could get.
I agree.
But I'm open to ideas. But the cheesy happy ending, like you're in fucking Antarctica, like this. There's no way this is going to work out well for you guys. You can only hope that win, but you're in Antarctica. So, you're not getting out of here.
That's right.
I think it's smart that Mac kind of he acknowledged that early. Like, look, we're not going to make it, but the best we can do is kill it here, keep it here.
Yes,
that's what I like. So it wouldn't make sense for him to just fly out of there like, yeah. Lucked out.
That's right, because it would really open up a large plot hole. Because a lot of what's established earlier is that Wilford Brimley destroyed the radios, and they could never reach anybody. So how did the rescue know to rescue them? They obviously
to do the test.
Yes, exactly.
Because if he told them, well, then how could they trust him? But then why would he tell them?
Yeah, exactly. And how would they know that he was in trouble? Antarctica is so big that even if you had someone within a few miles in that sort of a snowstorm, you wouldn't just see a column of smoke rising. The chances of him being rescued are, I'd say, next to nil. But maybe studio mandated happy ending. They were just like, oh, I don't know. Maybe a helicopter just happened to be flying by and they saw it, But yeah, I agree with Chaney. What do you think, Rebecca?
Yeah, I think the ending the way it is, it's what I grew up with. But yeah, it's interesting to read about the happy ending because you go, oh, okay, but I don't know how it would.
And there were variations on the ending that we have now. One of the variations, as I started to say before, was that MacReady survived alone. There was no Childs did not show up. So that was one option they had. It was just MacReady sitting there by himself watching the fire. The other ending, which is the one that we got, was the one where Childs appears and he survived as well. And they're sitting looking at one another and they have this brief conversation. And they're sharing a drink, and there is this question about Childs. Is that Childs, or is that the thing? So it ends on an ambiguous bit of dark tension, where you don't know who is who and what is what, which I think is great. Who goes there? The original story title. It's exactly how it ends. Who are they? Can they trust each other? That's the whole theme of the story in a lot of ways. So I think thematically it ends brilliantly, not only in that it is a cool kind of dark ending, but I think it's a good capper to what the entire film was about. I think if you just had him sitting in a medical room somewhere getting a test, it's just like that. It's like Chaney said, it just sort of kills the whole theme of the movie. Yes.
The theme of paranoia.
of who goes there and who can you trust?
Yeah.
Or can you trust anybody? There's famous TV versions in which you had the dog. There's a shot of a dog, the wolf dog, Jed, running away from the fire. and stopping and turning, looking back at the camera, and then disappearing into the darkness. Have you guys seen that particular version?
I don't know. I can't remember.
You know, it rings a bell. I feel like I have, but it must have been a long time. Like you said the wolf runs away as the place is burning.
Yeah.
Takes a look back. Okay, yeah, I think I have.
Yeah, and that was just that was added to the TV version for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why that's only in the TV version, but obviously the suggestion is that the thing survived and is now going off to find somebody else or some sort of life elsewhere. I got to tell you though, the Ennio Morricone score, man, I can't believe John Carpenter. I always used to think as a kid John Carpenter wrote that, because it's such a John Carpenter score. You know what I mean? It's like Ennio Morricone climbed into John Carpenter's mind and wrote a score, and it's the thing, because just the whole bum 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 bum. I mean, that's such a Carpenter riff. I love the score. I think it's probably one of the eeriest, and fitting the location, desolate scores that you're going to find. So fitting for the movie. What do you think?
I couldn't agree more. Morricone's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean,
he's just brilliant.
Could you imagine like a wild like string and horn orchestration going on behind the thing? It just couldn't.
No.
Yeah, it just wouldn't.
No way.
Great Carpenter-esque score by Ennio Morricone, who obviously himself is a master and was at this time for all the Sergio Leone films, and and then later he would go on to work with others, obviously Quentin Tarantino more recently, in The Hateful Eight. Great composer. Now, I'm trying to think, is there anything else I want to go over before I jump into the release of this film? But the thing about the thing is, the thing about the thing, that could be the title of the episode, is there's so much that you could talk about, and just diving into some of the scenes. I think it's a brilliant movie. I think that everything from the beginning all the way through, we should give a shout out. I mentioned Jed the Wolf Dog, but Jed was one hell of an actor. That's one thing I should probably mention, because Jed was amazing. They were talking about, the scene where the dog walks down the corridor and looks into the door.
Yeah.
This story. Carpenter was just blown away by it, because they set up the camera and it was like this sort of move. It was a little complicated. They wanted the dog to walk down, look in one door, and then stop, look in, and then go into the room. And they were like, we're going to be doing this all day. And they set it up, and first take, boom, Jed does it perfectly. And Carpenter is just totally blown away. He's like, what the hell? Is he on a remote control?
No, he's the thing.
Yeah, he is. He was as smart as the thing. And they were like, well, I guess maybe we should, do another one to justify this? So they did, and he did it again perfectly. So Jed was quite a good little actor there, good little wolf dog actor. The one thing that they did say about Jed, though, was, as I said, he was a wolf dog. He was a hybrid, and there was a little bit of a, he had a little bit of the wolf in him. So they would talk about how, you had to be careful sometimes. If you ever got spooked and he sort of locked on something or grew very still, they were like, just back away from him, let the trainer come in, don't approach him. And apparently
the craft table said he was hungry like the wolf.
Duran.
Sorry, I had to.
From a view to a kill.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun.
See, we're bringing it all together again.
Somehow. The trailer for this was released again in front of its contemporary, which was E.T. the Extraterrestrial. And one of the producers of this movie said they went to watch the trailer as it played before E.T. And part of me is thinking, why would you play a trailer for The Thing in front of E.T.?
Which is, yeah.
It's kind of weird, because especially since they were only released like 2 weeks apart.
And also E.T.'s more like family.
I don't think
that's a family film, and the thing, Grandma's taking her kid to go see E.T. and she's got to sit through the Thing trailer. And I'm sure Grandma wasn't like, "We're gonna go see that, Sonny."
exactly.
2 weeks.
And one of the producers was talking about, when he saw the Thing trailer in front of E.T. and the audience gave no reaction, he got really worried. But I'm like, well, the children were probably terrified. I mean, I don't necessarily think that is the greatest indication how that crowd reacts. But, it debuted number 8 in the country, and it dropped out of the top 10 fairly quickly. It ended up grossing about $19 million against a $15 million budget. So was not a huge success. Apparently that summer, 1982, people wanted their aliens to be a little more kind and gentle, and it was an R-rated flick, I mean, the Thing was a hard R. Which we also talk about, Poltergeist.
I was going to say, just throw Kurt Russell's ass on a flying bicycle.
Right?
That's how he escapes the camp. He's like, do 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 do.
Flies across the
with the wolf dog in the basket.
Yeah.
That's how the film. That was another alternate ending. You just didn't get the memo.
No, I'd never heard about that.
Direct from Spielberg's office.
Poltergeist was released that year. Though I have to say this, Poltergeist was released and it got a PG. Now, I've always said Poltergeist is not a PG movie. I mean, but it had Spielberg behind it. So, it was a great movie, but not a PG movie in my opinion. The Thing was R, and that might have kind of killed it a little bit. Perhaps if Poltergeist had been R, more people would have stayed away. It wouldn't have made as much money. So, but Carpenter didn't have the pull, I think, in the MPAA that Spielberg did.
Yeah.
Definitely affected his career. Carpenter lost jobs because of this. He was about to direct an adaptation of Firestarter, the Stephen King book, and lost the job because of the critical and the financial disappointment of the Thing. Universal had a 3-picture deal with him, and they paid out his contract. So he lost his contract with Universal because of this. Eventually, he made Christine just because he was so afraid he wasn't going to get another job after the Thing. In hindsight.
It's crazy to think in hindsight.
Yeah. In hindsight, it's like the Thing is such a masterpiece and people go, wow, this is amazing. But at the time, it was such a disappointment in terms of, Carpenter, just I think in general, but in terms of his career, it hindered him for a minute, it's disappointing returns. It is considered, however, the first in his Apocalypse trilogy, followed by Prince of Darkness, which I've done a show about. Love Prince of Darkness. Prince of Darkness. Yeah, I'm glad I find another person who likes Prince of Darkness, man, because I've had to argue this point several times. And it's like, guys, come on. Prince of Darkness is like the low budget The Thing, only with the devil instead of, the shape-shifting alien.
Instead of Wilford Brimley.
Yeah. But he did get Donald Pleasance into Prince of Darkness, I couldn't imagine Wilford Brimley playing the priest in that. He probably would have been a little too kindly. In the Mouth of Madness was the third in that trilogy, by the way.
Yes.
3, I think, really good John Carpenter flicks. A good trilogy, that Apocalypse trilogy. And they were obviously all, and they weren't necessarily, they're thematic. It's a thematic trilogy. The one story doesn't lead into the other, but the idea of the world falling apart and people, sort of a small group of people, or in the case of In the Mouth of Madness, one person being kind of sole witness to what's coming, But yeah, I think, such a great film in hindsight. I really enjoyed it. We talked already about the prequel starring Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Joel Edgerton. It answers a question that people always ask from The Thing, because remember, one of Dills, that you discover in that prequel is that when the thing assimilates people, it does not assimilate any sort of artificiality like earrings or I guess
Fillings and stuff.
yeah, fillings. And at the end of the thing, Childs is sitting there and he has an earring in his ear, which, I mean, if you go by the prequel, that means that he's not infected because he wouldn't have the earring. I think it goes back to the mystery thing, the ambiguity of is he or isn't he is
what is Carpenter's rules though?
Carpenter's rules?
Yeah, no, I'm saying, if the prequel says, if you go by the prequel, then he's not because he's got an earring. But it's Carpenter's film at this point.
Carpenter's rules is that he definitely could be the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what you go by.
Okay. Hey.
I'm sorry.
No, I totally understand. Yeah. I agree.
Unless he does the prequel or was really involved with the prequel, it's like, okay, we'll let this tidbit in so people have some kind of. Then I'll be accepting of it. But if that never happened, then obviously he wasn't thinking about that when he shot that scene.
Well, let's do a little speculation as we wrap up.
Maybe I'm being a little.
No, I totally agree with you. Yeah, I do believe that if it's Carpenter's film, you go by Carpenter's rules. Absolutely. But I did think it was just a little odd that in the prequel, they went out of their way to answer that question. Because
and that question should not be answered unless it's Carpenter.
Exactly. Yeah. What do you think? Is either of them the thing at the end? Is Childs the thing? Or is it better not to know?
I think it's better not to know because me personally, I always wanted to think that they're both still human and they're both just gonna kind of drink and then freeze to death. Yeah. It would break my heart to think that Childs, snuck off, stayed gone, got taken over, and then shows back up. I'm like, hey, it's Keith David, but he's an alien now. That doesn't sit good with me because I want Childs to be okay. I want Mac to be okay. I want them to just chill. They can. It's still ambiguous because it's not answered. But in my head, they're both human. They both made it, and they're both gonna die buzzed.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Good and sloshed. Yeah. No, I agree. That was always my sort of interpretation too. I never really had in my head that he was the thing, or that he had been infected. Though the possibility obviously still existed there. I just always loved the ending of this movie. I think Carpenter had the right idea when he decided to go dark and ambiguous.
I do have one big problem with the ending, though. It's always bugged me.
What's that?
I think the issue with it was that I think they may have run out of money or maybe the effect just didn't work, so they scrapped it. When Knowles, the last guy left, walks off, you never see him again. I guess originally he did have a death scene, and I guess the effects just didn't come together. But either way, he's never mentioned again. And I've always wondered, I'm like, what the hell happened to T.K. Carter? Like, he's obviously been killed, but I don't remember seeing his face in like the big monster, right, that he blows up. You can kind of see other people's stuff, but I couldn't pick him out. It just always bugged me that because it feels like just a loose end. Give me a scream or something.
I do wonder sometimes the infamous stop motion monster that was scrapped from the movie. For audience members who don't know, the original idea was to have a stop motion miniature model that had, weird tentacles and things that was moving around. But when they actually shot it, they put it in the movie and they looked at it and they're like, this does not fit the other action. The stop motion is not. I mean, obviously, if you had CGI, you could just do it easily. But so they cut it out. Sometimes I wonder, was Knowles in that stop motion version?
I think so. I mean, because that kind of correlates to I think the effect or whatever his death involved just didn't work. And they ended up scrapping it. They didn't forget about him. They said it just didn't work. So that's probably it. He probably ran into that the monster after it's done killed Moffat, and then here's Knowles, and then he's just gone. that always always just bugged the hell out of me a little bit. Null's got he got nothing. Just walks out of frame and he's gone.
That's right. Yeah.
He was one of my favorites. He was the cook. Everybody likes the cook. He was my favorite. He made it that long just to walk out of the room.
He had some great lines too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he loved his music. Never tell him to turn it down, by God.
Yeah. True that.
Yes, very, very good point, Knowles. He walked out through one door and walked onto the set of Saved by the Bell, I think is what happened. Because that's
probably.
That's another TK Carter classic. But anyway, I think we've wrapped up our time on The Thing. It was a fun discussion with my two buddies, Chaney and Rebecca. I want to thank you guys for being a part of the show. I want to
my pleasure.
Thank you all for watching. We're going to have to do this again sometime, Chaney.
Oh, yeah. Anytime, man.
But until then, I want to wish you all a good week. And I want to tell you to make sure to stay smart, stay healthy, and to take care of yourselves.